Hey everybody, good afternoon. My name is Dustin Strong and this is Strong in Health. This is our Ask Me Anything hour. This is where we answer all the questions you've submitted to us about eating, not eating, wellness, all the things that you have questions about. So if you have questions while you're watching this, go ahead and type them in the comments below and we will answer them either now or we'll answer them in a future one. It's every Tuesday and Thursday about 1:30 we go live to answer your questions. You can also email us at info@stronginhealth for questions and answers. So we're going to talk about two things today. Two things. We're going to talk about veganism and we're going to talk about intermittent fasting. So we have some question. Is intermittent fasting, is it a fad or not? And that's a great question because there are a lot of people who are using this and they're doing it in different ways. Now, I have an entire video that I created about fasting and long-term fasting and intermittent fasting, and I encourage you to watch that to give you more information than what I'm going to give you right now. But I will say this, there is a lot of benefit when done correctly, and that is with all of these fad diets that are going in. There's a way to do them right, and there's a way that is going to be destructive to your body, so you have to be careful. One of the first things I always caution people going into any type of fasting, and this is always going to be the point of differentiation that we're going to be highlighting and bringing to the forefront of your knowledge, is the micronutrient factor. What do I mean by micronutrients? I mean all the little things that we're not talking about. Things like magnesium and vitamin B and potassium and a whole host of vitamins and minerals that we aren't talking enough about. If you're already in a diet that is low in those micronutrients and then you do something like fasting, you can actually make a problem that's already bad worse by doing that. However, there can be a lot of benefits to intermittent fasting when it comes to people who are having a horrible diet and you're removing those things. So you can have good benefits happening at the same time, but I would still caution to make sure that you're taking the time to give yourself a little bit of that new nutrition, that nourishment that your body needs to be able to support you through that fasting. So one of the things that I do want people to start investigating in this and looking into this is because you can start to undo a whole host of problems if you do it right. And in fact, once you get to an 18-hour fasting window, we really start to see a lot of scientific evidence that's supporting that we're able to turn around insulin resistance. We're able to help our body be able to utilize insulin better, which is a problem across the board in our country. In fact, I was just having lunch with a doctor who was asking about diabetic problems and blood sugar balancing, and that would be one of the things that I would actually start to help that person understand is you can do that. Now, should you do it every day? Probably not. You have to find a version that is going to work for you. We usually tell people to start somewhere around a 12-hour window, so you have 12 hours where your body isn't working on things, it's not trying to digest things, and then maybe narrowing that window of eating time down a little bit over time. So there's a ton of value to it, but you do have to do it right. And another thing to just think about is the fact that historically, a couple hundred years ago, it's not realistic to say that humans were eating 3 square meals a day. It was just not possible, it wasn't practical, and so I don't think that our bodies are specifically designed to have to be constantly intaking food. I think that's something that has happened over the last 100 years or so where we start to say, eat, 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 you always have to eat, you don't look like you've eaten enough, you gotta eat some more. And if you're not eating foods that have actual nutrients in them, then you're really not doing yourself a favor, you're making it even worse. So there's a lot of value to it. Case in point is we have a great success story of a lady who is not willing to do a lot when it comes to her diet. She's not willing to make changes. So she wants to eat the same thing she's been eating, but she's been struggling with weight loss forever. And she did start doing a little intermittent fasting, meaning that she was just eating within a specific time frame and allowing her body a break from food a little longer than she had in the past. And in 6 weeks, she's lost 10 pounds, going down to that type of a model. So for her, it was a helpful way to keep her from eating at inappropriate times, eating excessive things late at night when she's hungry. It was an ability to actually be a little more specific about the amount of food that she's taking in because she restricted the amount of time that she was eating in. So that was a huge success. The other thing that I want to talk about when it comes to fasting is, again, there are long-term and short-term benefits when it comes to how consistently you're doing it and when you're doing it. So again, I hate to refer you to that, but I go into greater detail on that video about it, so I would watch that. But for now, I would say 100% investigate it, 100% look more into it, but make sure you're doing it in the healthiest way possible. Okay, another success story. Sorry, I've got a couple success stories I want to share with you because we have a lot of people thinking that they're in a position where they can't do something about their health. And in fact, even today, in a couple of discussions that I've had, people thinking that they have a tendency towards diabetes because it's run in their family. Now, diabetes specifically is one of those that you can have an incredible measure of control over, regardless of whether or not you have a massive genetic component that's pushing you in that direction. There are many things that we're going to do here at Strong on Health that are going to be outside of what people are normally talking about that can be massive influences in helping you change that. But I do want to reference the EPIC study that we talk about a lot when we're talking about Healthy This Way. And the fact that in over 8 years, the 23,000 people that they looked at, if they changed those 4 lifestyle factors alone, just these 4 major things, meaning not smoking, reducing your BMI, eating a whole food plant-based diet, whole food plant-based diet, and getting 3.5 hours of exercise, they were able to reduce the incidence of diabetes by 93%. So just those 4 factors have a massively significant impact on that. And so there's so many other things outside of that that we can tell people about. Now, we did have a young lady come to us, and over the last year, she wanted to share with us that she is no longer diabetic after making not just those 4 changes, but a few other things in her life. And she lost 50 pounds over the course of a year. So that says a lot of great things about what is possible and the importance of staying with things long term. This is where I think in health we start to have a real difficulty understanding what's truly working for us and what's not working for us. Because so many times people do something for a short period of time and they won't get the entire desired result, what they were hoping to get in that time, and they're not respecting the fact that this is a condition that has been developing for many, 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 many years, and they're hoping that they're going to correct it in a couple of weeks or months. So the fact that she stuck with this for a whole year shows that the time element is the one thing that we just have to respect nature's time clock when it comes to that. And this is a caution for all of you out there who are trying different things, who are trying intermittent fasting, trying a keto diet, trying paleo, trying veganism or vegetarianism, is anytime you bring in a massive change like that, short term, you may see all kinds of things change. But you have to think about long term. Our lifespans are longer than a few weeks. Our lifespans are longer than a year. So the choices we're making now aren't just going to be completely reflected in what happens over the next couple of weeks. I want you to check in with your body and pay attention to what's happening. But too many times I'm hearing people say, oh yeah, so I made all these changes over this time, but in the last couple of weeks, I went vegetarian and that made all the difference. You have to respect all of the changes that you've been putting into your body over a long period of time, especially when it comes to micronutrients. And you're going to hear me say the word micronutrients a gazillion times more before I die, because that is the biggest secret sauce in keeping your body going. And it is something that you can't just correct like that. Deficiencies like iodine and potassium, you can't just all of a sudden say, oh, you haven't been getting this much to make up for that entire deficit right now. It won't happen that way. You cannot absorb all those nutrients like that. It's going to take a while for your body to be able to slowly bring in those nutrients in an appropriate amount. And that's going to be heavily dependent on your body's ability to digest and absorb those nutrients. Okay, so it is a long game, guys. And so for those of you who are having questions about veganism, and we're getting a lot of questions about that, I'm very fortunate to have Dr. Pia here all the way from California to be helping us out today. And we've had several discussions already today with people talking about veganism versus vegetarianism. And I asked her, I said, if there's one thing that you could caution somebody going into a vegetarian or vegan diet, what would it be? And she said, there are going to be deficiencies. There are going to be deficiencies when you're changing to any one of these, whether it's keto or paleo, and that's absolutely right if you aren't very careful and very knowledgeable about where you're getting all of these micronutrients from. And all of you vegans and vegetarians out there who I love and adore and appreciate the fact that you are making massive changes and you're actually helping inform and inspire people to view food as medicine and understand how powerful food is on our health, I really just want you to continue the education beyond it just being vegetables versus non-vegetables. We have to look at all of the aspects of what could be contributing to the changes. I had someone just tell me today that they had stopped eating for a couple of weeks meat, and they all of a sudden their digestion is a little bit better, or they're not as constipated, they're having different changes. Now, we can't just say that that is due to the fact that they're not eating meat and eating vegetables, but that's what we tend to do. We tend to oversimplify. The questions I would have to say and ask are, number one, how is your digestion overall? Are you able to fully digest protein? Because if that's the case, and it's incredibly common that people aren't fully digesting proteins, then it's not necessarily about the fact about meat being the problem, but it's the fact that your digestion isn't at full capacity and you're not getting everything you should be getting out of your food. So you still have to receive that information, use that information to make you a stronger version of yourself and able to fully digest things. And sometimes you need to take a little break from meat to do that. But the other thing I want to make sure that we look at is, what was the quality of that meat? Did that meat come from a source that was saturated with excess hormones? Did they inject that cow with estrogen to fatten it up before they harvested that cow? Did they inject it with antibiotics? There's so many things that we truly have to really pay attention to understand whether or not what is actually causative versus what's correlative. And that's tricky to do, and it takes time and energy and true diligence to understand what is really causative. So I just want to caution everybody to be overly correlative. In fact, one person even said to us, well, you know, my doctor's been eating like that for a couple of weeks, she's healthy. So that is like the epitome of taking and really taking something away from what could be scientific. Observing somebody over a couple of weeks with some minor changes in their diet is not observing all of the factors that have really gone into understanding what's happening in that person's health. So all that being said, I'm going to do an entire video in helping people truly understand what veganism, vegetarianism, and whether or not meat is appropriate. Because we have so many movies coming out. We have the latest one called The Game Changers, and I really want people to understand, if you're going to elect to make that choice, and you absolutely believe in it, and 100%, I want to support you in that choice. But more importantly, I want to support you in understanding that there are little things that you're going to have to avoid happening to you, otherwise you're going to become unhappy. There are so many associated research articles that will tell you when people go into a vegetarian state, they have a higher tendency towards depression because they're missing very important elements to their diet. And omega-3 fatty acids are going to be in the top of that list for me. So I just want to make sure that if you're going to do that, that you're finding a way to satisfy those essential needs. Essential fatty acids, meaning they have to come from an external source. You cannot fabricate them. You cannot make them out of carbs, okay? You have to be able to get them to be able to keep your body healthy. So for those of you who are out there, please keep those questions coming, because I want to support you in your journey to become healthy, but I want to make sure you're just turning a blind eye to things that are going to turn up down the road long term to be causing you health issues that all of a sudden you're going to attribute to something that happened in the short term, but it's been happening in the long term. Okay. All right, and finally, that leads me to one last question here. Oh no, we have another success story. Gosh, so many success stories. Hemorrhoids. We love talking about hemorrhoids around here. In fact, we did a video just a little while back, and luckily it reached the audience that I need to hear, and we have an amazing success story. Someone who had been struggling with them for decades, I mean constantly having problems. In 3 weeks, from some changes that we discussed, they're the most comfortable they have been in, it says here, over 20 years. No more bleeding, hemorrhoids have shrunk considerably, and doctors unfortunately weren't able to give them any other answers other than, we'll cut them out for you. Is that what the direct quote was? So there's always something you can do is the takeaway here. And if you know anybody out there who is struggling with these conditions that we discussed, share these videos, send it to them, let them know that the conversation can continue in finding ways, even things that have been around for decades, your body still has the capacity to heal it when you get the right micronutrients in there for your body to get the job done that it's trying to do. All right, finally, somebody said here that they watched our last video about reasons that they can't lose weight, and they just want to ask to help with that. They're doing 75% of what we spoke about, so do the other 25% is my first suggestion. Just kidding, I know I'm playing with you here. But they need some tweaking. Help me, please. Seems like I can only lose weight if I go on a, quote, diet. I'm back at the gym 4 to 6 times a week. I'm getting fiber and iodine. As you know, I eat veggies a few times a day, not always cruciferous though. And my liver, not sure I'm supporting it enough. Does it say anything about my body type if I hold my weight in my lower abs area? And I know that the things I've been taking have been helping me. I feel better, I'm sleeping better, and my cycle is regulated exactly on the day that it should. Okay, so we got some great positive changes happening. And again, one thing that I would make sure that we talk about is realistic time frames. There are no realistic goals, but there are unrealistic time frames all the time. So we want to be respectful of nature's time in this. Are there ways to improve upon this? You already know. You can support your liver in more ways, and there are a lot of things that your liver needs beyond cruciferous vegetables. So I would examine your diet and make sure that we are supporting that with all kinds of micronutrients that it needs. But when we're talking about fat-building hormones, we have talked about estrogen a lot last time, but the other two to be mindful of are cortisol. Cortisol would be a hormone that is going to come from your adrenal glands. And if anybody who's had any endocrine disruption, meaning if you've had any problems with your thyroid or any level of adrenal fatigue, then there can be some issues with the cortisol levels that are going to build fat around the midsection, specifically like you're saying. But finally, insulin. Insulin is the mother of all fat-building hormones, in my opinion, and that will also create belly fat. And we talked about the fact that so many people are having problems with insulin resistance because we have overdone the carbs. And that is ultimately how I'm going to tie it all the way back to the beginning and say why I would encourage people to look a little more into intermittent fasting in a healthy way, and also looking at doing a healthy form of keto, because we want to slow down the spikes in insulin, because those spikes in insulin are going to continuously create insulin resistance. We need to slow that down so it gives our body an opportunity to regenerate, repair, and get back to a level of homeostasis and balance. Thanks for watching, guys. Lots of information today. I really appreciate the questions. I hope this was clear and helpful. And if you know anybody who needs to hear this information, please share that with them. And we will keep bringing more and more answers and questions in the next one. I got a question for you guys, actually, before you go. What is healthy to you? That was another thing that Dr. P and I are talking about, is trying to help people understand what is actually a definition of health and what is long-term health. And I would think about three things: being pain-free, having energy, but what about long-term? That's what I want to know. Okay, thanks for watching, guys, and we'll see you on Thursday.